We've lived in this van for nearly a year and DIY'd our own electrical system, which hasn't needed any maintenance thus far. Check out this video if you want to learn all about how to do this yourself.
We're Maddie and Nico, and we are turning this empty cargo van into this tiny home on wheels. We have no building experience, but we'll take you along each step as we transform our 2020 Ford Transit van.
Welcome to our electrical explanation video. This video is going to be broken up into two different parts. The first part, I will show our electrical diagram and go over each component of our electrical system. And then the second part, I will show our system in our van and go over all of the pieces that are in place there. So let's get into it. Okay, I'm going to start explaining our electrical diagram. We're going to keep it simple in the beginning and kind of just build from there. This is our main system. So what we're looking at here is we have our two lithium-ion batteries. These are each 100 amp hour batteries, and they are wired to each other in parallel here. From these batteries, we have our main system fuse, which in our case is a 250 amp fuse. Between that, and it goes to the switch, which is our main power on-off switch for the whole system. This thing up here is our Lynx power in. This is a Victron product. You can get a Lynx distributor, which will have fancy lights on it, and it'll have places for you to put your fuses. We modified the Lynx power in. It's very simple. It's just adding a few nuts and bolts so that way it can hold fuses, and the purpose of this is to keep our system nice and tidy. So we will be posting another video, and I will link it here once that's up. The video will be going into how to modify the Lynx power in, but it is essentially just a pair of bus bars and fuses. It keeps everything nice and tidy in your electrical system. This is kind of where everything will be connecting to our electrical system and connecting to our batteries. You could think of these as just extensions of the positive and negative terminals of our batteries. So also from our batteries over here on the negative side, we have 2-aught wire for all of this system. And this connects to our shunt, which is what we use to monitor the system. This orange line here is indicating the OEM wire that comes with our battery monitor. Ours is from Renogy. You can buy one from Victron or a couple other companies, but we will have the Renogy products linked below. And it comes with this wire. I mentioned in our pre-wiring video that this is a good idea to pre-wire this with the rest of your wiring for your electrical. That's because you might want your battery monitor to be further away from your battery system. This shunt also has a small positive wire that is just to power it from the system. That is what that little wire here is. I believe that's just a 16 gauge wire, but always check the manual for each of these products and see if they recommend something different than what you are seeing here or anywhere else online. This wire here is another 2-aught negative wire. It goes to ground. This is just attached to the bare metal of the van to ground the whole system. And in our electrical install video, we will show you exactly how we attach that. This is basically the main system where our batteries are. To add to this system, we will have 3 different ways of charging the batteries, as well as our 120 volt AC loads and our 12 volt DC loads. So now I'm going to show you our solar system up next, which I'll add into our diagram right up top here. And just to make things a little bit more clear, we'll zoom in on our solar system and you can see how it all connects here. So in our particular van, we have 400 watts of solar, which is 2 200-watt panels. They are connected in series up top of the van. The wires enter the van and they come to this, which is our solar disconnect. In this case, it is a 63 amp breaker. Both positive and negative are going into this breaker. It's all 8 gauge wire from the solar system. Our Renogy solar kit came with the wires. If you don't buy a kit, you might have to buy your own wires and calculate your wire size according to distance and the amount of solar you're getting into your van. You can watch our pre-wiring video and I kind of explain how to calculate wire size in that video. Anyways, it comes through the solar disconnect. The point of this is so you can disconnect the solar power to the system, so that way if you need to work on the system and you're still getting sunlight, you can shut that down. It goes through the solar disconnect into the MPPT charger. In our our system, we have a 40 amp MPPT charger. This is also from Renogy. And then we have a positive and negative wire going from that down to our links distributor here, where they are attached. Positive goes on the positive bus bar, negative on the negative bus bar, and then we have a 40 amp fuse attached there. Moving on back to our wiring diagram, we will then add our next charging source, which in this case is our shore power. So looking a little bit closer at the shore power here. Shore power and 120 volt power will all go into or come from this inverter charger here. The inverter is a little bit of a more complicated element, and it was harder for me to find information that was clear about how to wire this online. But after doing a lot of research, this is what we came up with. Just for simplicity's sake, none of these wires here are going into I'm not showing them going into the exact ports on the inverter charger just because it's a little bit tight to see that, but we will have a video of us installing the inverter charger and you can see exactly where all of these wires are going into that inverter. So we have a positive 2-aught wire going to our positive bus bar. We have the 2-aught negative wire going to the negative bus bar. This has a 200 amp fuse here. This inverter charger also requires a ground wire. It is just an 8 gauge ground wire. That's what the manual told us to use, and that's the only thing that fits through the holes in this thing. I don't know why Renogy has such a small ground wire, but that's what they have, and that's what the manual says. So anyways, the ground wire is also just grounded to the negative of our bus bar since our whole system is grounded to the chassis of the van. There's also a wire that just connects to this on-off switch. In this diagram, it's orange wire. In reality, it's probably just a black wire filled with a bunch of small little wires. And that one is pre-wired to the area above our door, and it goes into one of these holes down here on the inverter charger. Then we have 10 gauge triplex wire. This can be bought online. I'll link it below. It's marine grade wire. It's similar to our duplex wire. The only difference is it has a third wire in there, which is that green one there that represents the ground, which is what you will find with 120 volt things. They always use the triplex wire. It's connected to this inlet, and this shore power inlet we mounted to the back of our van, and this allows us to connect just with either a 30 amp shore power connector, or we can use a converter and use a regular extension cord. It's fairly simple to install and to wire to the inverter charger. Just make sure that you have a little bit of extra wire length to work with. It makes things a bit easier. All right, so back to our main system here. We'll be adding in our third charging source. For our van, we also allow DC to DC charging, which allows us to charge off the alternator of our car. So here's how this is all connected. We have the Renogy DC to DC battery charger. This is a 40 amp DC to DC battery charger. It's connected with 4 gauge positive and negative wire back to our links power in, and it is fused with a 50 amp fuse right here. And then on the other side of it, we have more of that 4 gauge wire. So the negative wire does go to the negative terminal on our battery, which is located under the driver's seat in the Ford Transit. The positive 4 gauge wire runs from the DC-DC charger to the breaker to the CCP pin, which is located on the side of the Ford Transit driver's seat. We had to look at the Ford Transit manual to see where all the connection points were. These will vary based on the year of your car and which type of car you have. For simplicity's sake of the diagram, we just show it going to the positive terminal of the battery. It's like it's connected there. So the CCP is called the customer connection point, and it's rated for 60 amps. So that was perfect for our case and for connecting to the battery. You'll just want to make sure you check your manual and maybe do a little more research based off of what vehicle you have. We have the 2020 Ford Transit, and this will be the same for a couple of different years. I'm not exactly sure which years. I should also mention that we have the single battery model, which means that we have one battery underneath our seat. Some vans have 2 batteries. Okay, the final part of the DC to DC charging system is this 16 gauge signal wire. This comes from right about here on the DC DC charger, and it runs back to the general area of where the car battery is. We had to buy this C33E pigtail harness to connect to a connection point, which is located under the driver's seat near the car battery. Basically what the signal wire is doing, it is letting the DC to DC charger know that the van is running. So that way the DC to DC charger is only taking a charge from the car battery when the van is running. Otherwise we would significantly drain our car battery, which we don't want to do. The way it does this is it connects with this harness to a pin near the battery that only gets power when the car is on. So that lets this know to charge only when the car is running. The other way to combat this is you can always flip on and off your breaker switch. We actually mostly have our switch off, and then we only turn it on when we want to charge with the DC-DC charger, like if it's a cloudy day or we have a long drive and we need a little extra boost to our batteries. We'll go into more detail of this when we show us installing the DC-DC charger, but this is just a picture of basically how that is wired. Okay, so now we have all three of our charging components to our battery system. We have our solar panels, we have our shore power, and we have our DC to DC charger. I'm gonna now explain how we've connected our different loads. So we'll start with our 12 volt loads, which will be a little fuse panel like this. Here's a closer look. It's pretty simple. We have 8 gauge wire connecting our fuse panel to the positive and negative sides of the links to power in. And we have a 60 amp fuse right there to fuse the whole DC system. And then this just shows an example. There's all of these positive terminals on this side, and this is a negative bus bar on that side. So all of your DC loads, like your lights, your refrigerator, your water pump, your fan, all of those loads will be coming and connecting into this little box here, and then the whole box is attached and fused to the system over here. Finally, we have our 120 volt AC loads, which connects to our inverter charger. Like I said, the inverter charger has two purposes. One is for bringing shore power to our charging system, and the other purpose is inverting 12 volt power to 120, so that way we can use our 120 volt appliances. Our van is really simple. We just have two sides of 120 volt outlets. If you are building an AC on your van, sometimes you'll need to wire that in as its own connection to your inverter charger. It really just depends on your setup and what kind of loads you have. But for our system, it's rather simple. Here's what it looks like connected to our inverter charger. We have 10 gauge triplex wire that goes from the inverter charger to this breaker box. So we have two 15 amp breakers in this box, one for either side of our outlets. We have our driver's side 120 volt outlets and our passenger side 120 volt outlets. And so that all connects into our inverter charger, which I already explained how this was connected to our distributor. Here's another look with the shore power connected as well. So this is the whole inverter charger system right here. And that covers all the bases of our electrical diagram. It's a little bit complicated, but once you see the second part of this video, it'll get more complicated. It is a little bit complicated, but I tried to break it into different pieces so that way it could be a little bit easier to understand. It helps to watch multiple people's electrical videos, maybe find out whose system is more like the one that you want to build. But this is basically our electrical diagram right here. I'll also put a link in the description to the far out ride electrical diagram, which allows you to make changes to it so that way you can adjust the solar to be exactly how much solar you want, and it'll adjust wire size as you add to it. I found that to be a helpful tool when we were planning out our van build. Some people like to just pick an electrical diagram and follow it exactly. If you're still with me after all of that explanation, please give this video a like. Thank you so much for being here. And now we're gonna go back in the garage of the van so you can see all of this in action. Hello from the garage of our van. I'm on the passenger side of the van. This is where all of our electrical has been installed. We will be posting a video that goes over how we installed all of the electrical, including how we built this platform that most of the electrical sits on. Primarily, our stuff is either mounted to the wall or stacked on top of this little platform over our wheel well. So now I'm gonna get into each part of the system that I explained in the electrical diagram, and I'm just gonna point them out where everything is, starting with the core of our system, which is our batteries. We have 200 amp hours of battery storage. That's two 100 amp hour lithium ion batteries, and they are behind this protective piece of plywood right back over here. Those batteries are wired in parallel, as you saw in the diagram. They are connected with a 250 amp fuse. That is our big boy fuse, which is right over here. This is connected with this 2-aught wire, which comes up to our switch here, and that is our master on-off switch to turn the system on or off. So the purpose of the main power on-off switch is so you can turn your system off if you need to work on anything on your electrical system. It's on the majority of the time. We haven't had it turned off since we were building the van. If you have to work on any of your electrical, you want to make sure that you are not getting power to those components. The best way to do that is just switch it to off, and then you can work on anything. That switch is connected on this. It's called a Lynx Power In. It is essentially just two fancy bus bars. As you can see underneath the hood, we have a positive and a negative bar here. Anything that needs to connect to the positive or negative terminals of the battery can connect onto these bus bars, and they act as an extension of the battery terminals. You can see here there are nice places for all of the fuses, so all of these wires are fused, which protects them from any kind of surges or things like that happening. So along with the main central part of our battery system is this shunt right over here, and the shunt is what tracks our battery system, and it is connected with a little wire, this black one up here, which goes back to our battery monitor. So this will help us know how full our battery system is, if things are charging. The shunt is what provides that information, and it is just on the negative terminal here. It also has this 2-aught black wire, which goes back to the negative terminal of our batteries. So that makes the complete circuit there. The few reasons we have the Lynx Power In instead of just two separate bus bars is that it keeps things nice and tidy in here. The fuses have a nice place to go on the Lynx Power In, and it made it very clear for my brain of where to hook things up. Everything has its own spot on the power in. You'll notice that our main on-off power switch and our shunt are directly connected to the Lynx Power In. There is not a wire connecting them. When we have our electrical video, I will show you the whole process of connecting everything. The point of that is just to save money on wire and to save space. It's a little bit more of an efficient way to have everything spaced out here. Next up, I'm gonna talk about our charging sources and then our loads, which will all be connected into the Lynx Power In right over here. Okay, so now I'm gonna talk about our charging sources. We first have our solar panels on the roof. We have 400 watts of solar. We have two 200-watt panels. So they are on the roof, wired in series. You could check out our solar video to see how we installed those. We made a separate video for that. The solar panels are wired on the roof, and the wires come in through the entry gland, and then it comes over to our solar disconnect, which is this little gray box here. The purpose of that is, one, it works kind of as a breaker or a fuse. So if there's any kind of surge in power, something was going wrong, that would break before the power gets to our MPPT controller. The other thing is if you have to work on your system kind of similar to the main on-off switch, you can just flip this switch to off, and then there will be no power coming in from the solar panels. Because even if you turn off the main switch to the batteries, so no battery power will be flowing to the system could still be getting power from the solar panels because those are always getting power from the sun. So that just turns the solar panels off basically. And I should mention the wires from the solar panels came with our Renogy solar system. So usually when you buy a kit with the MPPT and whatever else, it will come with the wires needed. So those wires are 10 gauge wires and they come into the solar disconnect, and then from there we have wires connecting that to the MPPT charge controller. The point of that is it regulates the power coming from the solar panels and changing it to match what the 12-volt system can handle. You will need to pick your MPPT based off of how many watts of solar you have, so there are different size MPPT chargers. For ours, we have a 40 amp MPPT, and that works with our 400 watts of solar. Once those wires are in the MPPT, there are also wires coming out, and they connect to the positive and negative bus bars on our Lynx power in, so that way that power is able to reach the batteries through that system. So our next charging source is our 30 amp shore power inlet, which is located off of the back of the van. From there, that's wired from the outlet that we have to plug into shore power, and that comes into our inverter charger, which is this here. The inverter charger has two purposes. It helps with inverting 12-volt power to 120-volt, which I'll explain in a minute, but it also charges our batteries through that 30 amp inlet that we have off the back of the van. It is also connected to the Lynx power in via these two aught cables going into that. Then our third way of charging our batteries is with our DC to DC battery charger, which is this box here. It is a 40 amp DC to DC charger, and it has a couple of different wires. So these wires here, they go back to our car battery to charge our house batteries via the car battery, via the alternator. And these wires here, down below, coming off of the left side of the charger, connect into the Lynx power in, so that's how the power is delivered to our batteries. There is also a third wire here, which I'll point out, that is this one, which is a signal wire. The signal wire also goes back to the battery, and you should check out, we'll come out with this video later of us installing the DC to DC charger. It goes back to the battery and it sends a positive signal to the DC charger to let it know when the car is running, so that it can charge off of the car battery when the car is running. We also have a breaker close to the car battery to protect the wire and also to turn the DC to DC charger on or off. We can just switch the breaker on or off if we want to charge with the DC charger or not. We typically only do it on longer drives or on cloudy days when we're not getting enough solar. So those are our three ways of charging. As you may have noted, all of them come into the Lynx power in because everything needs to connect to those bus bars in order to power our batteries. Now I'll talk about our loads. I'll start with our 12-volt loads. Right behind me down below here is where our fuse panel is. That's where all of those wires that we pre-wired in our pre-wiring video go to for our 12-volt loads. From there, they are all fused. That's where each of the little 12-volt car fuses are in that box. That fuse panel is connected via these wires right here into the Lynx power in to our batteries, so that's how they get power as well. So wires connect to this power in not only provide charge to the batteries, but it also delivers power from the batteries out to the different loads that we have. Okay, up next is our 120-volt loads, which is, in our case, are just our outlets on the driver's and passenger side. From each of the outlets in the van, the wires all come into a breaker box. This is just a normal household breaker box. Like I said, you can get a fuse box for your van that has both your 12-volt and your 120 in one box if that's easier for you. We found for our system, since we only have the outlets, that this works better for us. Our wires go into the breaker box over here, And then out of this breaker box, this is 10 gauge triplex wire coming out of that breaker box, and it goes into the inverter charger. The inverter charger was used to bring in shore power to the van. It is also used to invert the 12 volt power from the batteries and send it to that breaker box and out to the loads as 120 volt power. As I pointed out earlier, this inverter charger is connected into the Lynx power in via these thick 2-aught wires, which is how the power is delivered to this, to the breaker box, to our 120 loads. With all that being said, that's our entire electrical system in a nutshell. Keep an eye out for our electrical install video, which we might be breaking up into multiple parts just to keep things a little bit simple and not have a really long ass video. Those videos will be coming out soon, and comment below if you have any questions. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to give it a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We're coming out with more electrical videos in the coming weeks, so if you want to see how we put together our entire electrical system, make sure you're subscribed.